ladies and gentlemen, my brother, Peter Asciutto.
Hey! Where's the microphone? Did it start from anywhere?
Yeah, start anywhere you want. Wait a second.
First of all, we all hear crazy stories. Did y'all read that about, Tiger Woods won the...
Yeah.
And did y'all read about the guy that did the bet? That bet $85,000 on the thing?
No.
He just had this premonition and stuff, and it was literally almost every dollar he had, he flew out there and bet the $85,000.
That he would
I
win.
think that Tiger Woods would win.
Really? Wow.
And he ended up winning one. That's the biggest sports payoff bet that they had lost. It was like $1.2 million.
Oh wow.
And the guy bet everything he had. It's crazy.
It's a good thing he won. Yeah.
Well, thank y'all for coming out tonight. So what we're going to do, give a little history of Sebring, Florida, this area and stuff like that. And hopefully it'll trigger memories of back in the day. I think Harry's recording this for the Historic Society or something like that.
Yep. Keep going.
For the Sebring Historic Society. And just to let you know, they're not familiar with I'm Peter Asciutto, and that is Harry Havery, and we are brothers. And I'm going to tell y'all the family history. And our mother, and we say this out of love, because when I say this stuff, talk about our family history, it is what it is. You can't change it. You might as well roll with it. Our mother loved us, and we loved her, and she did the best we can. So, our mother, Helen Lanning, was married 7 times to 5 different people. She married the same guy twice. She married 2 guys twice. Yeah, she married 2 guys twice. So basically, my father was first in the rotation. My brother Charlie's father was second in the rotation. Then she had another guy, Charlie Dietz, who was third in the rotation, no kids there. Fourth in the rotation was Harry's father. Then it was back to my father for number 5.
Wow.
Then it was back to Harry's father for number 6. And then it was back to Tom Scholl for number 7. And then she ended up, she should have married number 8 because he's pretty much one of those hard-working millionaires, but they were a high school sweetheart that was together for 17 years. And pretty much every time, come on in, have a seat, Aaron. And pretty much every time my mother was in between marriages, she went to visit this guy, Art Conklin. And Art Conklin, he was a salt of the earth. But, and his claim to fame was, at one time, he was the uncle to the Duke of Hazzard's John Schneider. He should take John Schneider fishing and stuff. Yes. But then his brother and them got divorced when they were teenagers, so he didn't really keep up with them after that. So basically, my mother, if you put her name together, it would be Helen Ann Lanning, Asciutto, Danik, Dietz, Havery, Asciutto, Havery, Scholl.
Wow.
So Dawn gets this idea the other day. She goes, "Hey, I'm going to put all this stuff on a spreadsheet." You would think it would be easy, but when you got separation papers, child support papers, divorce papers, marriage licenses from Florida and New York, divorce licenses from Florida, New York, Alabama, and Mexico, it just gets pretty confusing. And we did find out, which is kind of interesting, marriage number 2 to my father was, I forget what year was that, 68? It was 1968. They got married November the 20th. The 24th, November 24th. Separation papers were filed December the 20th. The divorce was January 18th.
Wow.
And the marriage to his dad again was February the 4th. So in a 2-month period, she got married twice and divorced once. And then under this paper we found out, she goes, used to go by Helen Lanning or Helen Lanning Havery. She went by Helen Avery. At one point she went by Helen Danik Dietz. So she would just combine the 2 marriage last names instead of going to the maiden name. But we loved her, and you know what? I laugh about it, we joke about it, but it's our history. And if she did not divorce my father, she wouldn't have had Charlie, which he was a sports guy with me, and then we wouldn't have had Harry if that didn't happen. So it is what it is, and it makes for good stories along the way. And just real quick about my father's side. My father's side was Joe Asciutto, and his wife was Helen, and she was Swedish, and he was Italian, and they got married. And when my father was 14, there's two stories. One is she got his rifle and tried to kill him, my father. It was like an inch from his heart. So if she was a better aim, I wouldn't be here telling y'all this story, and y'all would have other things to do in your life. But the other story was my grandfather, which is this part's true story. He owned a dress factory in New York City, so he was pretty loaded and pretty connected. There's always rumors he was mob connected, and the other rumor was they were having marital problems. It was a hit on her, but he got shot instead. My father got shot instead. I got the articles to prove it, man. I don't have to make it up. And then to get my father to say that my grandmother shot him, he offered him a horse. Supposedly, he said, "I'll give you a horse. I know you want to be a cowboy. I'll give you a horse if you say this." So that's the rumor there. So we are a very functional family with all this going on.
When's the movie coming out?
You don't even want to. Yeah, they ain't even started. Netflix. Someone suggested this is more of a Netflix season because you can have different seasons based on marriages. You know. And okay, here's the other thing. We're looking through this thing with her idea. We cannot find one of the marriages, the licenses, but we found the divorce. And which my mother was a devout Catholic woman. I mean, she was at church every single day. I think because she had a hotline to the Pope to get these things annulled. But we cannot find the marriage of Charlie Dietz, but we find the divorce of Charlie Danek. Now, same first name, same initials, that solves a lot of problems when you just could roll with the same Charlie name and you don't have to change monograms. So we can't find out when she married Charlie Dietz. But there's a 6-month difference between when she divorced Charlie Danek and divorced Charlie Dietz. So we're thinking there's a possibility there might have been a crossover where she became Mormon for a little while and was married to two, but I don't know. But we grew up here. Ralph, Harry's father, Ralph brought us down here when I was in 2nd grade. And we lived in that house next door, and that's where we grew up. And it was a great place to grow up in South Commerce, and my mother's house is the last residential house standing on South Commerce Street. This place has changed, the history of things. This was Frank Koza's grocery store. And back in the day, for those around here, they'd had various grocery stores around town. They had Koza's Market, was it L&M down on Kenilworth. They had Peppers over there by the school, and they had different ones. I don't know them from me, but people who lived in those neighborhoods, y'all had those little convenience store, grocery stores back then. So this was Koza's Market, and this went from Koza's Market. And Larry, you may know some of those other ones. There was a couple down Kenilworth. There was L&M, and what was the other one? The one on the left down from you. Which one was L&M? L&M's the one on the right.
It was down in Highlands Homes area on the right.
And
It was on the middle of.
Come on in, Billy. How you doing?
How you doing?
That's Robert.
Peter. It's Robert.
Robert.
IGA in the circle.
The IGA in the circle. Robert. Where's Billy Joe?
He just got off from work at the post office.
Okay, come on in, Robert. Have a seat, man. Get a seat. Have a seat or somewhere. Or Robert Channon. I'm glad you came. We're talking about the history of the thing. In this area, this was Frank Koza's grocery store, and then it became a bunch of things over the years, and we're glad that it became the music land. At different points, this was owned by Ken Wilkinson. I don't know how many of y'all remember Ken Wilkinson. He was the first Republican elected to county office in Highlands County. And what was cool, that Glenn Wilkinson we went to school with, and he was in my class. So we played, me, Charlie, and Brian and Michael Howes, we would play baseball right in this little yard back there. We'd play wiffle ball. And y'all know the movie Sandlot? And remember when they would hit the ball over? Well, there was a fence back there. There was a crotchety old man who lived back there that had an orange grove. And he yelled at us a couple times, so we would literally be scared and have to do that whole run, jump, and get the ball and do it. And then Ken, good thing I went to school with Glenn, because me and Charlie, we would play wiffle ball back there, and then we would play like hardball. But every once in a while, we didn't feel, instead of getting a catcher, we didn't want the ball to roll in the road. We used his air conditioning thing back there for the backstop. And he'd come talk to my mom about all the dents he had in the thing. And this also at one point, it became, there was a black funeral home, and I was talking to Billy Joe about this earlier. For a little while, and I knew the folks because I had a store, Sunshine Sales, across the street from my mom's. Remember Sunshine Sales? You got business cards from me. And these folks were from Miami, and they had a chain of them there. But they could not ever get the business from Kearney Funeral Home over there. They said, we just can't get it. I'm like, man, they've been here forever. What do you know? What can you do? And Kearney, the Kearney Funeral Home was phenomenal over in the Washington Heights area of town. I want to talk about that a little later. About the part of the history of Sebring. There's a rich history over in the Washington Heights area that the folks in Sebring know literally nothing about. But so in this neighborhood, what's cool about growing up in this neighborhood, me and my brother Charlie liked playing baseball, and that's in the time when they had Tuscaloosa Park up there. And who remembers Tuscaloosa? I know Larry remembers it, and Larry remember it. It was a baseball field up where the tennis courts are. That was a Little League park, and they had the playground there. And that's one of the last playgrounds where they had the slides where you'd burn your legs when you go down the slides. And y'all know what I'm talking about in the hot sun, man. You would go down and you would stick, and you'd be coming out of that. And it had the round thing that you would almost throw up on or stuff like that. And they that became City Hall. I remember when they tore it down. And one of the legends from there was Tommy Young. They called him Tommy Young Mammy Young. He was probably 6 foot when he was in elementary school. And I don't know if this was a true story or not, but there's always a rumor that when he was 8 years old, he broke a kid's ribs with a baseball from the pitcher's mound. And I played baseball with him throughout, and you're always scared to death when you got up against him because he had a heck of a fastball. He had a heck of a fastball. And stuff. So, that place got torn down. And y'all know the building right up there by the City Hall, the one behind the tennis courts, there's a building. Okay. Anybody know where that building used to be? That used to be the coffee and donuts place for the Catholic Church. And they moved the building over there. And I know that building well because my mother, the devout Catholic woman, she would always go to a church at 8 o'clock, so she'd let us go to like the 10 o'clock mass. So we would walk over there, and they had Father Schneider, who gave 45-minute sermons, which if you're a Catholic, you don't deal with 45-minute sermons. So rather than going into church, we would play around that building hide and seek until church got out, then we would walk home. That was a good old day. Father Ed, man, he was a good guy, Father Ed. It happened. So that's the building up there. This the old coffee and donuts place. And a couple places over there. Like I said, we grew up next door, and across the street I had Sunshine Sales and Promotions for a lot of years. And the owner of that building is Dick Brown, Aaron's father, and he was a great man. And I rented from him for about 6 or 7 or 8 years. From like 80, I came home from college, and then I hated renting from across the street from my mom. But it was cheap rent. It was, for the time, $350 rent. And it was good because I struggled during the 80s. I literally struggled. So I lived in the back room over there and ran the business, and I had a soda machine in the front. And there were times when, thank God I had the key to that soda machine, because I would get the money out of the soda machine to eat on Sundays, waiting for money to come in where the cash would start coming in. So I rented from her father for about 6 or 7 years, and I paid rent for like 3 or 4 of those years while I was there. So I owed him money, and he was always good about it. And then after I moved, I kept coming, and when I'd come through town, I would stop at Wicks, Brown & Williams. I'd give it $100 here, $200 there. I finally paid him off. Took me like two years after I moved to pay him off and stuff. And he was a brilliant accountant, right? So when I paid him off, I dropped the money off to Valerie Odom. She's Valerie Taylor now. She's worked there for years. I got a letter in the mail. And you'd think it would be an elaborate spreadsheet. It was just a yellow sheet of paper with numbers on it, a legal pad. And he said, "Thank you, you're an honorable man." And it had a balance of 0 on it. What a great man. And her dad was, if y'all remember Dick Brown, he was one of the first people that was in that first running boom around here. And he's the first person to ever started there. You remember seeing him run? He had that heart rate monitor on it. So he was a great guy. He left us too soon, not to bring up what he said, but he was just a wonderful and gracious man. I couldn't have had a better landlord for somebody who couldn't pay his rent. But we left it even where I didn't owe him nothing, and it literally took me almost 2 or 3 years after I quit renting from him from paying him off. But that was across the street from there. Another thing across the street, if y'all remember across the street, that place, I forget what it was when we moved there. What was it? Do you remember what it was when we moved before the Greyhound? I forget what it was, but right across the street, y'all remember it was the Greyhound bus terminal. The Greyhound bus terminal was across the street, and was in high school at the time. And there was it wasn't like indoors at nighttime. They had a bench outside. So living next door, we would get a whole bunch of weird knocks on the door at different times of the night to use the phone to do this, to do that. But what I remember most about the Greyhound bus station over there is the rookie coaches for the Sebring High football team. Because back in the day, with game film, whoever the youngest coach was for the varsity team, they had to sit over there till 2 in the morning, till the bus came, to give them the film to put on the Greyhound bus so they could take it to whatever and get it delivered back like early in the week. That was before FedEx and all that stuff. Yeah, that's how old we are here. And a couple other neighborhood things, then we'll go on to some other stuff, is, playing ball back there was good. But also, how many of y'all remember looking up at the Apollos and stuff when you grew up here? You had a place to look to see the rocket launches and stuff. For us, we couldn't go out here. We had to go literally across the street right there, and we had to watch over the building, and that's where you could see the launches. You could see them during the day, and at nighttime, you would see it was really beautiful at nighttime, seeing the nighttime launches over in the sky. And I want to talk about fun stuff and a couple sad things I'm going to talk about is 2 cold days. You know how you have those cold days in Florida when you go outside and it's clear and crisp and as bright as can be, but yet it's really cold, like it shouldn't be cold? One day was January, I think 1986. It was one of those cold days. I had sunshine sales. I was over there. My first place before was over there. It was right across the street from the high school. And my mom and Tom, and I had an employee at the time. I don't know how many times I fired him. His name was Harry Havery. Mom and Tom pull up. And what I remember about that day, seriously, I remember you on that day, is like, you're so indifferent to everything in the world because you were on this art project or something. But we're over there.
I went out and watched it.
Yeah, then you were playing with the copier. I come back. I'll digress here. I come back one day, and back then when copy toner was really, really expensive, I come in, he's watching the store, and the entire garbage can is filled up with nothing but papers full of toner, except for one. He put some glasses on, put a thing on, and get sunglasses, and he kept putting his face on it. But he ended up with this awesome image of John, looked like John Lennon. Do you still got that thing?
I'm gonna go get it.
I don't know how much that cost me because copier was that's why I was late paying rent to your dad at some point because he broke me. But that day it was a cold day, and my mom and Tom, husband number 7, if y'all are keeping track, she pulled up and she said, you want to see the space shuttle? So we went up to right next to the building was the laundromat over there on Kenilworth, and we watched. And for those of you who watched it, it was just like any other thing with the smoke. And then at some point you just said to yourself, something just doesn't look
Yeah.
right because they don't
That's all
split
floppy, yeah.
the things. I remember that being cold, and they don't split that way. And then we went back in, and Harry came out and stuff like that, and that was just a sad day. I just remember how cold that was on a clear day for that to happen. And I guess what was it, the ice or something on the things caused it or something, or the thing? The O-rings.
Had blow by and.
And it did, and that was just sad. And you watching it, you kind of knew and had this gut
Yeah.
feeling that something wasn't right there. So, I'll tell you about the other day. It's not kind of a sad day in a way. It was very sad. The other cold day, it was almost the same type of feeling that day. I ran for city council twice, and I had a perfect record because I lost both times. And I was in my 20s, and I ran, and I had this board, this actual sign that said vote for, with Peter Asciutto for city council and all that stuff. So after my second time running, I said, I'm not going to do nothing with this. And I had a vet. I was driving a yellow vet back in the days. I had bought it from Mr. Larry Johnson down there. You remember the vet you sold me? It wasn't a Corvette, it was a Chevette. It was a Chevette. That was a nice car, a little 5-speed Chevette I had. See, I didn't have money to pay your dad. I couldn't buy a real car, so I wanted to have a vet, so I paid him because he made sure I paid him. But so I figured in the back because I worked out my car. Okay, commercial time. Hold on. The presentation made it.
Your mother liked it enough to keep it.
We're gonna pass it around. Yeah. This is what I paid. That's why he was making minimum wage. You can take that and pass it around. He literally was. It actually came out pretty cool. You can pass that around.
Hey, you know what's even funnier?
What's that?
You know how I've been going through your mother's house cleaning all
Your
this
mother's
stuff?
Yeah.
I found like 30 of those in a
Trying to get the right one, man. Just trying to get the right one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
Oh, that's funny.
there's a guy named Guy. So seriously, the guy's name was Guy. He worked at security lock and safe for Tom Stewart, and he lived what's off of Valerie Road over there where they had the sinkhole.
Oh, yeah.
And this guy lived back there, and he was going to recycle my stuff and make a container thing that I could put in the back of my vet, so I could put books in it and stuff like that. And to back up a little bit, across the street from my house where I used to have Sunshine Sales before that, the DeBoses lived there. And the DeBoses, their grandson was this guy named Paul Luya. And Paul Luya used to come visit his grandparents. He was from Massachusetts. And so we got to know the Luyas. He was in your class, Paul. And he was a good guy. He was funny. He was hilarious. He worked with me at the car wash. I worked at the Phillips 66 car wash. And I remember when he had the hots for LaDonna Payday. And LaDonna was very, very shy back in the day. I don't know if y'all know LaDonna. She writes stories in the columnists in the Sun News. And he used to always, when she would drive by in her little Datsun, he'd work the car wash. He'd be like making all these things and wave to get her attention. And she would start like look a little bit. Then she would slowly wave. Then she started coming in getting gas. And then they ended up getting married. So that was her first marriage, was to Paul. And Paul was funny. He used to tell stupid jokes all the time.
Once there was a farmer. No, I'm sorry. Once there was a pig, and the pig had a farmer. And the pig said, "Farmer Jones, do you wear your cowboy boots to bed?"
It don't make sense. But the next time he would say, "Do you wear your pitchfork to bed?" He would insert random comment at the end of this. There was a pig that had a farmer, and when you heard it long enough, it was like, he was that type of thing. And I had seen Paul when they hadn't seen him for a while. Him and LaDonna got divorced and stuff like that, and he still worked for it. And I saw him out at the farm stores, the Sun Lakes, one day. I remember seeing him out there, and he was the same old thing, the same old smiling thing, and all that stuff. And then about 3 weeks later, I went out to this guy's house to get the board, and it was that same almost cold type day where the sun was out, and I took little Vinny's kid Bug with me, and he lived down the street from Paul and Donna's house, but they got split up, but Paul was living there, and we drove by and I saw the police cars there, and then I went back to see him. And Benny Holton was there, and Benny Holton was a police officer on the thing. I said, man, what's going on at Paul's? He said, Paul hung himself. He said Paul hung himself, and it was like just devastating. And he said he must have wanted to go because the rope was too long, so he had to keep his legs up or something. And it was just a friend that grew up over there. You don't know what happened or why. A guy who was always so outgoing. But the good thing about Paul, his memories, as bad as that day was, when we talk about Paul, it's always wonderful. He's the one that introduced us to A Horse with No Name and American Pie, because they played those songs up in Massachusetts before they played them down here, because back in the day things took a while to get down. So he'd have us call the radio station and request them, and they were weird names, so they didn't know what it was. So that's my two tragic memories of cold days and Sebring. So if it's a cold day and clear day in Sebring, remember things happen in threes unless you count by fours, then you don't have to worry about it and stuff. That's a little sad thing about that, but it's also good memories of Paul. Paul graduated with you too, Mr. Larry Jernigan. Remember him? You remember Paul, though? Yeah. But that was just sad. A sad day, and you can't get a better person than LaDonna. LaDonna's a wonderful person who was just sad all the way around. So to lift the spirits up, I'm going to pull out my little book right here. Get a little more. Oh yeah, my father's name is Vincent Asciutto. My brother, their grandfather's name is Vincent Asciutto. So my first name is Vint Peter Asciutto, V-I-N-T. V-I-N-T is my first name. And I've always wondered, how did you get that first name, Vint? And my mother, she says, well, we want you to have the same initials. I'm like, well, why not Victor, a name that people know or something? She goes, no. Y'all remember John Payne? John Payne was the lawyer on Miracle on 34th Street from way back with Natalie Wood show. Well, he was played the gunslinger in a TV show called The Restless Gun. And his name on the TV show was Vint Bonner.
Oh.
So that's how I got the name Vint, from a TV character on a show. And my father always wanted to be a cowboy, so there you go. So a little book right here. This has some cool stuff in here. One thing that's cool about the computer, you can save everything. But sometimes, even when you save everything, you don't know if it's going to get lost in the computer, where you're going to find it. But here's what's cool about saving stuff. This is the baseball schedule for the 1974 Sebring Blue Streaks. And this is how, I don't know if y'all did that played baseball, you kept your stats that way, a certain way, or whatever sport you played, you would do that. And we had a pretty good team. Tell us how many games we won and lost. That was the best player on that team was Buddy Yarbrough. And I was talking to Dennis Davis yesterday, and we'll talk a little bit about the Roscoe Raiders. And we were talking baseball, and he graduated in the class of 72. So he was telling me a story about he goes, I was the only black guy on the team in 1972. And he goes, he wanted to play the outfield. So he was practicing outfield stuff and stuff like that. And he knew he could play in the outfield. But Coach Rapp called me in one day. He said, hey man, you're going to play infield. And you're going to play second base. He's like, oh, but Buddy Yarbrough plays second base. He goes, so I ain't going to get much playing time. Because he said Buddy was a phenomenal baseball player. I mean, he was a left-handed hitter. And he could just nail the ball. If y'all remember playing at Marge Skipper Field, that Buddy would always hit the ball. Buddy lived right there by the field, and he would hit the ball in the sand all the time up there. Phenomenal player to watch. But Dennis, then he says, but Buddy pitched. So I got to play second base every few games. He got to play second base behind Buddy. But that was a phenomenal team. Buddy went on to play triple A ball, I think, in the Grapefruit League. I don't know what that is. Is that triple A or something? But he set some records for triples that lasted for years up there. So, you know, that's back in the day. I know back in the day, we always talk about, I know they had to cut those trees down, but if you go down Fireman's Field, there's nothing like a beauty of a ball field when they had all those pine trees covering the entire field, but the trees started dying, so they had to cut them down. And then, I'm not going to bore y'all with this history. These are my baseball statistics for when I played baseball back when I was in high school. My sophomore year, I was up to bat 10 times, got 4 hits, you know. And I pretty much sucked after that in junior and senior. But, and I was 4 for 10. Then 10 for 37. It was not good. But that's kind of cool looking back and seeing these things. And another one that's a blast from the past, and I'm glad you were here, Mr. Larry Johnson. They had the Highlands County Tennis Association, which now runs the tennis thing out there. Back then, they remember the tennis ladder they had, Larry. Maybe it's this, in 1977, 78 tennis ladder. Let's see. You realize you beat me 2-6, 2-6 in a match? You remember that day? Yeah, you beat me 2-6, 2-6 in a match. Yeah. And then you beat me 3-6, 5-7 in a match. But is that when you look at it, and what's cool about this in the history of Sebring, there's some strong names on here.
Yeah.
You had Billy Page, he was a teacher, and I had totally forgot about him. He was a very good tennis player. You had Larry Johnson. Oh yeah, another time you beat me 1-6, 4-6. I don't know if I ever beat you. Larry could actually play right-handed and left-handed. That made him tough. It literally made him tough to play. You got Mickey Bird on here. You got Eugene Bankston. Then Alex Sardinia. I used to beat Alex Sardinia. Of course, he was like 6 years younger than me, so that kind of helped. Ed Lynch. Man, what a great man Ed Lynch was. Bob Brooks. And there's a guy on here, Chris Delaney. You know how you have memories, and it's weird how you have one memory of somebody? What I remember about Chris Delaney, he was a tall, slanky guy, skinny guy from Avon Park. And he was in Mr. McNeil's speech class with me up at the community college. And I remember I'm thinking, that's purely ridiculous, but you kind of knew it was true when he was saying it. He did a 5-minute speech back in 1977 on the evils of sugar and how sugar is bad for your body, how it destroys it and stuff like that. But sugar is so natural and tastes so good. But he was, as I get older, he was pretty much right about sugar. And no wonder he beat me 3-6, 3-6. And they talk about memories the other night. And do I have it? Oh, yes. And it's wondering how people have memories of you. They had that Hometown Heroes the other night at the Circle, and y'all know Kevin Roberts. I don't know if y'all know Kevin Roberts. Kevin Roberts, him and Ted were pretty good tennis players too, but I think they came after 77.
They were excellent.
They were very good. They were good doubles team, but my God, they were so tall and their arms were so big you couldn't hit the ball back past them or over them. But I said, Kevin, Peter Asciutto, he goes, oh my God, I hadn't seen you in forever. Then he goes, when Barbara was there as my witness, he goes, you know, the one memory I had for you was when you ran for Sebring City Council and you were in the parade and you carried a dungy cart, and you pulled and you cleaned up the donkey crap. And he goes, and you had a sign that said, I'm going to clean up the city or something like that. See? Elect Peter Asciutto, Sebring City Council. And there I am walking in a parade with that donkey cart behind me, scooping up right behind the horses, scooping it up. You can pass it around. So that's the memory Kevin had of me from I hadn't seen the guy in 30 years. Oh yeah, remember that time that you had a thing. And then this one here, I'm going to read a letter here. This is something how you have good memories of people and you're sad that they're not with us, but they're always going to be with you, you know, based on how you knew them. Bobby Henry. I don't know if y'all remember Bobby Henry. He lived in Highlands Homes over there. His father, I believe, was a mailman. I think it was Earl. Bob. No, it was Bob. So anyway, his father was a mailman. So Bobby Henry, the legend of Bobby Henry, he made All-Stars with us. Which, by the way, Terry Leapart was an All-Star coach back then. Y'all know Terry Leapart? If y'all want to see Terry Leapart, I don't come to town that often, but go to dinner with me, because every time I go to lunch, dinner, or breakfast anywhere in town, when I'm in town, Terry Leapart is there sitting down already somewhere. And Harry, is that a true story?
Yeah.
He always goes to Bailey's, and then I saw him at the one place, then I saw him at another. I was like, dude, man, come on, man. He's the only guy I see. But Bobby Henry, he was in our class, and he was supposed to pitch All-Stars one day. So Bobby Henry couldn't pitch that day. We got news that he had shot himself in the thigh with a bow and arrow. And you're gonna, yeah, I see the little look on your eye. So you're probably asking yourself, how do you shoot oneself with a bow and arrow?
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, game day, he shot an arrow into the air, and where it came down, he did not care until he couldn't see the arrow anymore. Then he started running across the field to his house. And if that didn't come down right through his thigh, when he did it. And it's like, Bobby, man. And so we had to get someone else to pitch. And then fast forward, that would have been probably around 1970 something, late 60s, early 70s. Fast forward to, I think it was the mid 80s to the 90s. I'm out at the Sebring races. And you know, the JCs back then, they had the little places in the middle of the midway where you sold things, and the JCs had our booth. And here comes Bobby Henry up there one night. He's just limping up to me, and I hadn't seen him in like years. What happened to you, Bobby? I shot myself with the Mangum 44. I blew half my foot off. I'm like,
Oh my God.
Bobby, how did you do that? And it had something to do with he was hunting, and he went to take a pee, and he put his gun next to it, and somehow it went over and it blew half of his foot off. It's like, so Bobby. And then years later, he's no longer with us. It was kind of sad. This is before really when the internet was just starting. So, you know, I was on the reunion committee to help with find classmates, and Bobby, you know, I found out that Bobby had passed away in a car accident over in Bradenton, or Brandon or Bradenton. And I don't ever write to people. I wrote a letter to his mom and dad just saying I was sorry to lose Bobby and stuff like that. And I don't ever write. And I don't know why I wrote, because it was just kind of the thing. I recapped the story about how Bobby was a good guy and how the only guy I knew who would shoot himself in the leg by accident so many different ways. And she goes, "Dear Peter, sorry I didn't get back to you sooner, but I have been extremely busy." This was 2006. "Peter, you can't imagine how much Bob and I appreciate your thoughtfulness. You're the only classmate of Bobby's we heard from." And I was sad about that, but in the defense of the classmates, that was a time before the internet exploded. And when we were looking, nobody had known that I knew that he had passed away, so no one really knew that he had passed away. It's now been a little more than a year. He passed on August 15th. We still haven't gotten his property and all that stuff, but we're working and praying. Funny, the arrow he shot through his leg stands out of your memory. When he shot through his leg and clipped the bone with his 44 Magnum is probably one of his worst tricks. And then she goes, "I still credit Mr. Eugene Bankston and his wife with saving his leg with prayer. I love those two. Thanks again, with fond thoughts." So part of why I read this is not so much about the thing, but about how the community pulls together. When he had that accident, had Eugene Bankston, who beat me all the time in the tennis ladder, has been such a phenomenal part of the history of Sebring and helping out families and stuff like that. So that's the last sad story. Tell you to talk a little bit about baseball here. Hal McRae. How many of y'all heard of Hal McRae? Baseball legend. He's from Avon Park. And rumor has it that he got his start in baseball and help over in Sebring at the E.O. Douglas fields back in the days of segregation. When I played ball with Robert and Billy Joe, his brother. He's a good friend. We played on the Elks together and all the way through high school together. You'd always hear them talk about, and the folks from the Washington Heights area always talked about Roscoe's Raiders, otherwise known as the Ponderosa Raiders. And what that was this guy Roscoe Campbell. He was an African-American grove owner over there, and he owned a lot of stuff, a businessman. He put together semi-pro baseball teams, and you always heard about it. It was over in the Washington Heights area. And there's a rich part of Sebring in the Washington Heights area that a lot of folks just don't know about, and they should. Because, I'd always heard about it. I saw an article in the paper about them. And they say Hal McRae played for them. And it was a semi-pro teams. They were mostly black. They're probably all black except for occasional white person. I was one of them. And they would play, and help me out here, you probably know better than I, they would play different communities all the time. And it was like Lakeland, Avon Park would have a team and stuff like that. And I was talking to Dennis Davis last night. He said sometimes Avon Park and Sebring would combine and stack their teams playing because it was like Sunday afternoons, and it would be a big event in the middle of Highlands and Lemon Street. They would put a barrel out with the sign up saying "Big Game Today." And I'd always heard about this stuff a little bit here or there, and my friends would talk about it with excitement and stuff. And after I graduated from high school and was done and was working at Winn-Dixie, Sylvester Lewis, which is Roscoe Campbell's nephew, he came to me and John King and said, "Hey man, y'all want to come play for Roscoe's?" And we're like, "Sure." John was white also, but he didn't make much of the stuff. So I said, "Sure." So I had a blue VW. I'd get in my VW. He said, "Yeah, just go out there, just go down. I think it's Martin Luther King Drive now. It might have been something else, or School Board Road, right by the school board." He just go out there and drive till you get to the end of the road and drive to the dirt road and take a right and follow the orange groves until you see a baseball field. What had happened was they used to play at E.O. Douglas, but when they were desegregating, they wouldn't let them use it anymore. So Roscoe Campbell decides to build a baseball field in the middle of his orange groves.
Oh, wow.
And sure enough, I remember I was like 22 years old. Threw my cleats, my old Sebring Blue Street cleats. They were still metal cleats back then. Threw them in the car. First time I rode out there in my Volkswagen, you're driving through a thing. Then all of a sudden, this field opens up, and there's a baseball field there. And he raised buffalo. Y'all probably know they had buffalo raised in Highlands County. And you could tell the buffaloes were the groundskeeper because they were buffalo pies all. And you tell me if anything's wrong here, Robert. So that would be the groundskeeper. And you had a fence and it was semi-pro. And while I was a semi-pro, I think he would pay the pitcher so much money if they won the game. And then he had a labor camp in the left field thing. If you hit a home run, you got so much money. And Billy told me yesterday, if you hit the roof of the labor camp, you got like 2 bottles. Whatever that meant. There wasn't any way you got 2 bottles or something if you hit the thing. And I remember I played a few games with them, and it was a little different. It was an organized thing, but it was a big talking to people. That was a huge community event over there. And there would be 300 or 400 people out there watching the game. And one difference I learned, it was a different type of thing. Like, I was used to the structured baseball of, if it was a 1 o'clock game time, you'd get there at 12:30, you'd warm up, you'd play at 1. Out there, I can't remember the coach's name, but he said, "Yeah, it's going to be 1 o'clock." So I get there at 12:30, and at 1 o'clock, people would start showing up. And another team might get there at 1:30 or 1:45. It's like, okay, time to play. And it was just amazing to do that. He had dugouts. There was a little tree in the back, and they had an oak tree. And Donald Taylor's little brother, what's his brother? Donald Taylor's brother's name. The one that was right younger than him. think it started with a D also.
Daryl.
Daryl would be announcing the game and playing music up there, and they would have buffalo. They would actually serve buffalo burgers and stuff like that. And it was just phenomenal. And you could see there was like, I remember playing Lakeland once, and it was, I mean, the crowd would just get on each other and stuff. But it was a wonderful community event. And then another time we played at Max Long, we played an all Hispanic team. They were either from LaBelle or Clewiston. They came up and played there. And I was the only white guy playing. And, you know, when you're in a situation like that, when you're in a situation where you're the only minority, you appreciate what a minority goes through when they're the all minority all the time. You know, I was in that situation, and the other team would just call out names, kind of like instead of pitcher likes, you know, batter, you know, what would they say about batter's got something? They would throw out racial names at you there because it's like, okay. And I remember one of the best triple I had in my entire life was against the Hispanic team because I pinch hit and I got up, and I remember hitting the ball off the fence and getting a triple. And they didn't say nothing after that, but that was pretty good. But it was a different thing, and it's just different things you learn by doing different things. And one thing I remember about the Mexican team, is that Art Owens, y'all remember Art Owens? Art Owens was the umpire. And at that point, I think he could still see out of one eye. I think he had one eye left that he could see out of. And Art umpired for I don't know how many years, but he was a great guy. But he would not let the game start until he insisted on the catcher to wear a face mask. The catcher would not wear any other piece of equipment and did not want to wear a face mask. And this is in hardball baseball. And Art was like, no, you're going to at least wear a face mask to play to be the catcher. And then I remember the shortstop being playing barefoot. But it worked. I mean, it worked. They played good ball. I can't remember who won, but it was good. And one thing about over there, I was talking to Billy Joe and stuff about the Washington Heights community. At one point, and you don't read about that much in the historical society and stuff, but that was a thriving community. I did not realize they had a movie theater over there until Billy Joe told me that yesterday.
Movie theater.
They had a couple of they had a whole
laundromat, movie theater, Willa Roberts gas station, taxi cab.
And then they had, and Billy Joe was telling me that Charlie Ward's grandfather had a hotel over there. Mm-hmm. Y'all know Charlie Ward is a Heisman Trophy quarterback from Florida State that went on to play 12 years in the NBA instead of going to football. But his grandfather was had the hotel or something over there.
A store.
Over there. So, and there's a rich history. I'd love to dig into that, and then I'd love to get like on the home sweet Sebring and stuff like that for them to get some of the pictures. I'd love to get some of the, if anyone has any pictures from the Roscoe's Raiders. They were officially called the Ponderosa. The Ponderosa Raiders. You remember Pat Mason? Pat Mason had posted a thing on Facebook, and after I meant to print it off, but it was really good about what the Ponderosa Raiders meant to them as a kid. They looked forward to the game all week, and it was just a wonderful community event. And that was back in the day when you had 5 channels on TV or 3, so it would be an afternoon for the community to get together. And me and Harry went out there last year, I think.
Yeah,
last year, and you still have remnants of the dugout. And I literally almost teared up when I saw the home plate was still there and the pitcher's mound was still there underneath the thing. So it was pretty cool. They've kind of settled it now. And Dennis Davis told me that he put together a team to play in Little League. I guess he coached Little League for a lot. He used to get the kids out there to play ball. But that's a whole rich history of Sebring that a lot of folks don't know about. But back that day, I remember sitting in the dugout. I know I digress, but I remember sitting in the dugout when we were playing Lakeland. There had to be like 300 or 400 people there and stuff. And I was looking, and it's kind of like, I know I don't live it, but that's when you get the feeling is that I'm the only one that looks like me in this whole area right there. So you gives it appreciation of how other people should be treated, of all races and stuff like that. It puts it all into a pretty good perspective there. You know, because I'm in Albemarle, and I'll do my little political thing in there. I remember sitting out there in Mrs. Parnell's place. She had a little place where we sit. And I remember when they went through the desegregation back in the late 60s. And that one year, I remember they sent all the 6th graders out to E.O. Douglas while they were building the new school and stuff like that. And I remember all the racial words that were said. You can't send all those 6th graders over there because they're going to be this, that. And you know what? It happened. And I think that whole year went out and was pretty uneventful. That, you know, people are people and kids are kids, and it all worked out. And they closed E.O. Douglas and made it the school board. But I was a county commissioner up in Stanley County, and they wanted to consolidate schools. And it's like, my God, it was like living in 1968 all over again. You would think that after all these years we would have learned something. But I'd have people coming in the store and they would use the term, those kids. We don't want those kids. And you knew what the hell they were talking about. And it was not right, and it's sad, and it's ignorant. Okay, that's off a little political thing like that. And needless to say, I did not get reelected because I was like, and stuff like that. But and they said, well, what's Tom Gordon? I think he's called Pork Chop. They used to call him Tom Pork Chop Gordon.
No, Pork Chop was his cousin.
His cousin. Okay, Flash. That's right.
Gordon.
That's right. Tom Flash and Pork Chop. Because that's what Dennis was saying. That also, as the end of the Raiders there, that some of those guys started to play with them too. Tom Gordon, he's a phenomenal baseball player. He's from Avon Park. That they got to play with the Raiders and stuff too. Wrap up with a few more things. Any questions or anything before y'all yet? Oh, I got to tell you about one of the great people of all time. You know, I wrote for I have a store, because my mother was married to 7 times the 5 guys and all that, yada, yada, yada. I have a store, Vac and Dash. We sell vacuum cleaners, running shoes. We do UPS shipping. We do screen printing. We do bicycle repairs, and a few other things. And I think being raised like I was, that helped me do all this diversity and stuff. But I also would write for the newspaper. I'd write the cross-country articles for the newspaper. And actually, when I would do that, I would think about Rick Moyer. Y'all remember Rick Moyer?
Yeah.
Fantastic person. Fantastic. And I would look through here. I would have articles that he wrote because he was always there with baseball and stuff like that. So I'm going to be like Rick Moyer to these cross-country kids. And I told you we had phenomenal baseball teams around then. And I told Billy Joe I was going to talk about this one here. Tampa Catholic Falls, right there, Tampa Catholic Falls, by Rick Moyer. Tampa Catholic had won the 3A baseball championship like 3 years in a row, and they were like 30-0 against 3A teams, and they came to Sebring. And we had phenomenal pitching staff with Don Brownell and Jerry Bones Heston. And I want to read you the words of, this is not I'm sorry, I got to get out of the Tampa Catholic game to this one right here first. Sorry about that. That was a heck of a week. The same week we beat Tampa Catholic, we also played Avon Park, and Jerry Heston threw a no-hitter against Avon Park. Now let's listen to the words of Rick Moyer. I don't know if y'all know Jerry Heston. They called him Bones. Skinny as a rail, left-hander. And I don't remember him before high school being that good of a pitcher or anything. But somehow he became a good pitcher. And as a left-hander, he had one of the best pickoff moves to first base. And I played center field to watch it. This is Rick Moyer. Jerry Heston pitched perhaps the finest game in Sebring High School baseball history last Saturday as he fired a no-hitter against Avon Park, winning 6-0. Heston, a long, lean lefty, was in complete control throughout. Isn't that good with the Heston, a long, lean lefty by Rick Moyer. And then we play. Here's the Tampa Catholic recap there. We end up winning 1-0 against Tampa Catholic. I think Don Brownell and Jerry Heston combined for the shutout. They only got 2 hits that game. Tampa Catholic, returning state champ. And the only run came with Billy Joe, Robert's brother, on second base, and I was up to bat. See you guys, family members. That's Vinny's daughter
Is that their
and granddaughters.
granddaughter?
Hey, honey, what's that?
Is that her honey?
Hey, get the honey, Lenny. So I tell you this story real quick. Then I'm about to probably. I remember Coach Rapp. I used to bat right hand. Coach Rapp wanted me to bat left hand in my junior and senior year because I was fast. They called me Rabbit. I could run down to first base faster, but I couldn't hit the ball worth a damn. Pardon the language. Sebring's only. Sorry, kids. I was referencing to the thing that holds water is what I was referencing. Sebring's only run was unearned and came in the third inning. Billy Joe Shannon led off the bottom of the frame with a walk and moved to second on a pass ball. Peter Asciutto then tried to bunt. That is true, I did try to bunt. Shannon to third. Philip Toledo, the Tampa pitcher, picked up the ball but threw wildly to third, and Shannon raced home for the game's only run. It was like the worst bunt of my life. It was right back to the pitcher. And then Billy Joe was pretty quick. He would just go back and forth, and the guy whipped and turned and threw the ball out to the clubhouse, and he scored. And then Billy Joe could verify the rest of the story. We just beat the 3A championship team, and guess what we had to do after the game? We had to run laps. Because Coach Rapp told Billy Joe to stop at third. Billy Joe got up and ran home. So Coach Rapp had the entire team run laps because Billy Joe didn't listen to the coach. He was trying to teach discipline. And we won the game 1-0, but we had to enjoy it by running laps. Billy Joe's like, he'll talk about, don't you remember y'all all hated me? It's like, man, we won the game. He said Mason Witten. He said Mason Witten was about to tear him up. It's like, man, we won the game. Now, Coach Rapp was a good coach, but he wanted almost perfection. And there's nothing wrong with wanting perfection. And one thing I learned about achieving perfection, if you have a goal to win a state championship, yes, perfection will get you the state championships before you're perfect. But rather than being perfect, if your goal is the state championship, you could have failures along the way and still hit the goals. And I really think Ronnie Jackson up in Avon Park was he was a phenomenal coach. And Coach Rapp was a very good coach because the records prove it. But Ronnie Jackson won state championships, and I think he was able to get his kids to peak and to hit it at the right time. And a goal of a state championship rather than perfection is probably a better goal. I got to tell something about Robert Shannon here. Y'all know that when you have teachers, that some teachers you're intimidated by when you're in high school, and then it surprises you that the ones that were cool in high school, you may not really like when you're an adult because you see them as an adult and they're not quite the way they should be. But when some who might have been hard or something, or you just were afraid of, they're just really, really, really nice people. And I hope you don't mind me complimenting you here, Robert. But I always remember this conversation. Is that I was watching a baseball game after I graduated. I went down. I was just sitting next to Ralph Janito. And I know it's insulting. What did people call him? We don't want to say. They used to call him Four Fingers because he had a finger cut off. And that was back in the 70s. But he was a very good coach. But I remember, and again, ended up being a good guy. Actually, with the coaching, what I remember about him, you would read the newspaper, the Tampa Tribune or the newspaper, what his plan was. He says, yeah, we're going to run the ball to the left. He would say that before the game. And sure enough, he would run the ball to the left, and the other team would know that we were doing it. But we were just sitting one day, and he was talking about the best athlete he'd ever seen was Robert Shannon. He said, Robert was just phenomenal. I know you had the speed and everything else. He said, I had him for phys ed, just, with all the other stuff. And we did golf one time, and he would just pick up the golf ball and just, bam, automatically knock it. He said, you play softball, you'd switch hit and just decide to swing left hand. He said phenomenal. He complimented you big time on athletics, which was very, very good. And one more story that I'll probably shut up about Coach Janito. And this will bring back memories of those y'all older than dirt. And it's kind of sad that Sebring and Avon Park don't play football anymore because it was such a rich rivalry. But at some point, I've been in positions where you have to make a decision, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision. But Sebring has 1,600 kids, and Avon Park has 1,000, and Lake Placid has 700. So sometimes some of these sports just aren't gonna match anymore. But back in the day, Thanksgiving Eve, the big football game between Sebring and Avon Park, that was huge. The night before Thanksgiving. Then people wanted, Thanksgiving became a week-long event, so they started moving the games to Friday. But there's a game up in Avon Park. It was cold out that night. A lot of cold stories here. And it was the very beginning of the game, and the quarterbacks were Charlie Lanier and Buddy Yarbrough switched as quarterbacks. And the very first play of the game, he did a trick play where he had them all in the huddle, like 10 people in the huddle. And I forget which one he switched in and out. But like, say Buddy was in the thing for the first game, he was like number 2, and the other whatever Charlie Lanier was number 3 or something. So he sent him in like he was subbing, and then the other one came out and stopped at the sideline and stood next to Coach Janito, in bounds though. And Avon Park thought that he was out of the game. And he threw a long pass, and they got down into field goal range, and they didn't score a touchdown, and kicked a field goal, and Sebring beat Avon Park 3-0. 3-0. That was just all on that one play. For some reason, they just could not score. I don't know what time it is. I've been talking a lot. What time is it, Harry?
5 after 8.
Oh, so I got other stuff, but I'll leave it for another time. I appreciate y'all coming out, but there's such, and I hope it brought back memories of things that you guys did and stuff like that when you were kids, and stuff you probably didn't care to know. I mean, some of y'all may have wasted an hour of your life you're never going to get back tonight. But I hope it was fun. But Sebring's just a phenomenal place to grow up, and there's good and there's bad, but it's history, and you just hope we all learn from it and stuff. And buildings. I look at buildings. The one thing, the only 2 consistent things are my mother's house next door and Fitkin's TV. That's like still there. Everything else has changed there. I gotta tell a Harry story. Can I tell a Harry story? Yes. They love it, man. It's a true story. Janine Hart. She's a teacher. Me and Barbara saw her at the thing the other day, at the pier. And we were talking about something with Harry and Toe Jam Band, and she says, there was always a rumor that Harry had a master key to the school. I'm like, that's no rumor. That wasn't a rumor. He had a key to the thing. And I guess it's Ralph Ewing. See, he was buddies with Ralph Ewing, the head custodian, because
I didn't get it from Ralph. I got it from Russ Hughes.
Russ Hughes. Okay, from Russ Hughes.
Yes.
He got it from Russ Hughes. I knew it started with an R. So he got it from Russ Hughes.
All the same.
And Russ, God rest his soul, is no longer with us. I want to tell the White Album story.
It's Abbey Road.
Okay, it's Abbey Road. We got to see. I'm glad we're historically accurate. Got to be historically accurate.
Can I
Yes.
may I?
Yes.
Okay.
Get it right. Yeah.
So,
You lived it.
So, Russ Hughes was my drafting teacher. And my grades weren't very good in
As
most
with
of my
everything.
classes. And there wasn't a lot I could do about it for most of those classes. But Russ was a reasonable man. And Russ and I would talk, and he liked the Beatles. And I happened to know that Russ always wanted a copy of the Beatles' Abbey Road on Apple Records. And so one day we were having a conversation, and I really needed at least a C in that class to keep my GPA reasonable. And I just happened to mention, Mr. Hughes, I have an extra copy of Abbey Road on Apple Records, and I've got a key to your room, but I don't have a key to your drawer for your filing cabinet. Now, if you were to accidentally leave that cabinet drawer unlocked, and I could get to your grade book, I might be able to find my way to putting a copy of that record in there for you. And so, a little bit, maybe it was the next day. I think it was at night. I went in and because I had the master key, so I went in his room, and Mr. Hughes happened to leave the grade book unlocked, and I happened to have a copy of Abbey Road with me, and he always marked his grades in pencil, and I happened to have a pencil with an eraser on it. So it was a mutually beneficial agreement, and it worked out just fine. And I got my C, and he got his Abbey Road on Apple Records.
Yeah, win-win for everybody.
It's a win-win. It's a win-win. It's a win-win.
And I can tell this other story about shop. The last one. So then my mother tells the story of, did Harry have a master key? That she gets a call from Billy Kaysen, like right before school starts.
Johnny Freeland.
It was Johnny Freeland. There you go. Johnny Freeland.
You better come back out.
Come back out here and tell the story about Reuters. You're trying to copy Reuters thing or something like that.
I had it.
You had it, okay.
So I got a call. This was during the summer, and school was out, obviously. And I got a call
You happen to have a master key.
that Sparks Disco was doing some remodeling in the disco, the DJ booth. There's a padded DJ booth that used to belong to Reuter, and they were going to get rid of it. So I was the school DJ, and I thought, oh, this would be really good for the dances. So me and my buddy Clark got in his truck, and we went and picked up this DJ booth, and we brought it to the shop room, because that's where all the tools were. And it was summer, and they weren't going to use any of those tools anyway. So we set to tearing that thing apart, and we kind of made a mess of the shop room, and we had junk laying all over, and we kind of messed it up. But we figured we'd have it ready by the time the teachers came back. But we didn't know Mr. Robinson, the shop teacher, was going to come back early. And when he came back early and saw that, he had a fit. And of course he knew, because it was a DJ booth, that it was me who did it. And then of course he had to call the principal and get him involved, and it really wasn't any of Johnny Freeland's business, but he had to get involved in it. So yeah, I got in trouble for that. Yeah.
He graduated.
Not too bad.
And you still had a master key.
I had the master key. Yeah. So what finally happened was, I was in the drafting room late on a Sunday night, and I was working on a light bar. I was building a light bar for the dances, and I had the music playing, and I was just by myself working on this light bar, and all of a sudden I hear the door jiggle, and the door opens, and Mr. Freeland walks in. I say, "Hey, Avery, what are you doing in here?" I said, "I'm working on a light bar." He said, I want to see you in my office on Monday." So to make a long story short, when I left, I accidentally busted the key off in the door, and so they had to get a locksmith so anyway, that was the last of my keys. Except I always kept a spare in my wallet. And so by this time it was Don Goodwin, who was the assistant principal, and we wouldn't even speak. I would see him coming, and he would see me coming, and he would hold out his hand like this, and I'd reach in my pocket, and I'd pull out my keychain, and I'd take off my master key, and without even speaking, I would just put it into his hand, and he would take it, and we would go our way, and then I would reach in my wallet and pull out my spare and put it on my key ring, and then later that day I would go to the lock and key place and have a copy made. So I always had a spare. When I graduated from high school, all the kids were handing Mr. Freeland baseballs, or they would hand him these things, and I handed him a master key. But it was a blank. It wasn't real. I had one for the longest time.
I love you, man. It's like this story. So this is a rich. That's part of the history of Sebring, a part of us, and what?
Tell them the Splinter story.
Oh, no, I can't tell them that.
Come on.
No, I can't.
Keep us on suspense.
Yeah, faddled. No. Yes, there are. Yes, there are. Yes, sir. For another time. Man, thanks everybody for coming. I hope y'all learned. I hope y'all had it fun. And I hope y'all got some good memories. I hope it brought out memories of what you guys did. And there's some. That's it. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
I might have had some other stuff, but you know,
Another time?
another time. Part 2.